In this third video lesson dedicated to the Augustan Age, we will address Jonathan Swift, who was born in Dublin in 1667 and died in 1745. Jonathan Swift is the second of the three most important writers of the Augustan Age that we will analyze during this English course. The first being Daniel Defoe, who's the object of our study in the first two video lessons. What differentiates Jonathan Swift from Daniel Defoe is mainly the fact that, unlike Daniel Defoe, who celebrates every aspect of the Augustan Age and the bourgeois individual, therefore of the rising middle class, Jonathan Swift, on the contrary, underlines its negative aspects and strongly criticizes the empty and corrupted society of his time. He does so by using to a great extent a great talent that he is endowed with, meaning satire. And we can define Swift as a master at this art that reached its climax through his skillful use of irony. And as we know, irony is satire's best instrument, but it requires great skill because it is mainly based on the extreme contrast between what is being said and its true meaning. In other words, what is actually meant is the exact opposite of what the words appear to be saying. His probably best example of of his use of satire is certainly A Modest Proposal, which was a satirical pamphlet of political criticism published in 1729. And it regards Ireland's dreadful conditions after a series of devastating harvests that caused widespread starvation through the population. However, according to Jonathan Swift, these were not the only causes of the poor conditions in which the Irish population lived during this time. Um, Two other main causes are, according to Swift, um, uh, greatly responsible for the Irish starvation. The first is the Irish short-sighted policies, and the second is the English exploitation that was devouring the island by applying mercantilism, which he considered highly inhuman, since those laws reduced everything in terms of productions and profits. His great ability in A Modest Proposal consists of first, in the introduction, by describing in detail the awful situation in which the Irish population lived at this time. And step by step, he brings the reader not only to understand and identify with the suffering of the Irish population, but at the same time, after displaying this great passionate tone, he coldly lists a series of number and statistics that sort of lead him to reasonably and in a matter-of-fact way um, putting forward to the reader his ghastly idea, which is that of encouraging these poor families to produce children in order to be used in the meat market for the rich. Now, obviously, it is an atrocious and shocking idea, which Swift is capable of saying in a very reasonable way and using a scientific approach to it in order to shock the reader and emphasize the absurdity and the um, short-sighted policies that were applied till then. His criticism of the Augustan Age is also shown in what is considered his masterpiece, Gulliver's Travels, or known commonly as Gulliver's Travels, although its complete title is Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World in Four Parts by Lemuel Gulliver, first a surgeon and then a captain of several ships, which was published in 1726. Um, it is generally considered even a children's book or a novel, but despite the fact that there is an overall unity to this work, it can be considered a number of many different things. In the first case, we can consider it a parody of travel books, which were very popular during this time. It is also a satire of Robinson Crusoe and the bourgeois individual that was quite celebrated during this time. And it is also a strong criticism of the blind faith that the Augustans had towards reason and scientific progress. The general plot of Gulliver's Travel is divided into four main books. The first is entitled A Voyage to Lilliput, where Gulliver is portrayed as a big body dominated by psychological needs. And the land where he is shipwrecked is populated by tiny Lilliputians who are rational beings with great knowledge of mathematical science, yet they use these qualities cruelly and as an instrument of dominion over others. Alongside, there's a fierce attack on English political parties and the religious conflicts between Anglicans and Dissenters. In the second book, we have A Voyage to Brobdingnag, which reverses the situation and describes Gulliver as a miniature man, small enough to fit comfortably in a box furnished as a room and entrapped in a world of disgusting giants whose huge bodies symbolize animality, which is opposed to Gulliver's reason, ability, and skillfulness. Yet again, Swift incomparable ability to use the contrast within contrast techniques allows him to unveil, in spite of the revolting appearances, the giant king's generosity and high sense of morality, while Gulliver is boasting about his superiority by naively illustrating to the king the social and political organization of England, characterized at the time by great corruption and immorality. Through these subtle devices, Swift satirizes the 18th century English political, social, and legal institutions. The third book is A Voyage to Laputo, in which the main themes are science and philosophy used to substantiate man's rationality. As in the other books, Swift here ridicules these efforts because no matter how much he tries, his deep wish to see man reach a balance between a rational use of scientific knowledge and its animality contained by a broader use of common sense is frustrated since man's behavior shows that those men who are too proud of their rationality end up losing all common sense. Again, here we have the opposing themes of reason and scientific progress, or rather the blind faith that the Augustans had in these two human aspects, and at the same time the inability to find a balance between emotions and humanity and reason and science. Finally, and this is where it is mostly evident, the fourth book, A Voyage to the Country of the Honeyhams, where Swift takes reason's instances to its extremes by endowing horses with it, which are also champions of honesty and morality. However, these horses completely lack emotion, so they cannot be fully humans and are instead in clear contrast with the horrible bodies of the Yahoos. As we have said, Gulliver's Travels is one time a fantastic tale of an imaginary journey in an utopian country, a travel book or a parody of Robinson Crusoe. It is also an allegorical story, a satirical essay through which Swift attacks and criticizes everything that the Augustan Age stands for. And it is also considered, as we have said previously, a children's story. But at the same time, in spite of the fact that Gulliver undergoes a powerful development throughout the entire work, and despite a certain overall unity, we can't really consider the book as a novel, even though it has been used later as a model for many other fiction works. When it first came out, reviews were not very benevolent, and intellectuals of the time actually saw in this work, and in Gulliver especially, the personification of Swift himself and its author's misanthropy, hatred, and frustration. Nowadays, instead, into the literary criticism has a totally a different view, and modern criticism considers um, Swift and Gulliver as having very little in common, and Gulliver is instead seen as one of many targets chosen by Swift to ridicule man and the society of his time. As a matter of fact, many have pointed out that Gulliver is described as a gullible, unimaginative character who believes all the possible good about his society, which he defends and champions. And here comes in the aspect of Gulliver's Travel being a parody of Robinson Crusoe, which is exactly what happens in Robinson Crusoe, and what Defoe does with that with the first modern novel. Instead, according to modern criticism, Swift is um, using Gulliver more or less as Voltaire had used Candide in his philosophical pamphlet. So the reception of the novel was extremely different between Swift's contemporaries and modern criticism.